So hello everyone. This is Kareem here. Hi Tim. This is the first
Hello.
time I guess I'm seeing you in a picture frame, although virtually. So
Yes.
welcome to the International Blockchain Olympiad 2021, and to this seminar on identity and privacy. So you already met Lawrence Ma. So Dr. Lawrence Ma actually going to be the moderator for this seminar. So I'm going to leave after I introduce you to the other speakers, and then I will remain in the background.
Okay,
so
great.
Tim, I was listening in to the some of the fascinating things we are discussing with Peter. Peter, is great to see you too. Uh, so I guess I guess Peter wants to remain in the background too. That's fine. So we have with us also Mr. Tariq M. Barkutullah. He's the director of the Digital Security Agency and also in charge of the Cyber Emergency Response Team at the Bangladesh Computer Council, which actually handles all the ICT related, computer related affairs for the government. So I believe he will come online in a minute or two. And who else are we missing, Lawrence? Is there anybody else?
Professor Aslam, also Atik Rabbani. I think we have.
Oh, Mr. Atik Rabbani and Professor Alim Al Islam. Okay.
Yeah.
I think they should be joining soon too. So, Tim, Lawrence tells me, and also Peter tells me that you are in charge of the identity project and digital identity project in Canada. So, what's happening there?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm in charge. When you get to these levels, you realize nobody's actually in charge. So I just try to do the best I can. So yeah, like I'm a senior analyst with a Treasury Board Secretariat, the Government of Canada. We're kind of the counterpart to Finance, Department of Finance, and we really set policies for government and for government departments and agencies. But by virtue of being a central agency, we coordinate a lot with like other jurisdictions and other countries to compare notes and that.
I see. Okay.
And so first half of my career I was out in the industries, and so I'm very externally focused, and I always like to make sure I understand what's going in the environment as opposed to like being internally focused. So by virtue of that, I've been kind of the lead pen on a lot of the, well, I would say, I won't brag, but if not the majority of the policy instruments related to identity, digital, and more recently digital identity, and then doing the work on trust frameworks. And yeah, so I guess that's my definition of being in charge, is basically being obsessed by this and fascinated by the problem, and also fascinated on how we can actually affect change or alignment, not only within government, but like society as a whole. So
that's wonderful, Tim. Yeah. I mean, I think you will find a common chord with our other speaker, Mr. Tariq M. Barkutullah. He is also extremely passionate when it comes to digital security and government policy when it comes to ICT matters. So I will let Barkot introduce himself for the other speakers, and then I'll come to Mr. Atiki Rabbani, our other speaker for this session, who is a veteran of the computer industry, software industry in Bangladesh since the early 80s. He has been involved with this industry and also with the industry associations, both for software and for computers. So I will come to him next. So Barkot, please, say a few, introduce yourself for the other speakers, please.
Okay, I am Tariq Barkutullah, currently working in the ICT division. I am director in Bangladesh Computer Council and also director operation in the Digital Security Agency. I also run the Bangladesh CERT, which is BDD eGov CERT, the national CERT for Bangladesh. And I also work in a team for drafting various acts, laws, and regulations for the ICT security, digital security, cyber security, and ICT policies. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So as you can see, like you, I mean, he also wears many different hats. So Tim will find that, I'm sure he'll, it strikes a chord with him. So I will come to Mr. Atiq Rabbani. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, greetings to Tim Boma, I mean, to Lawrence Ma, to Peter Wu, to other, well, thank you very much. I feel really privileged to be here in the same panel as Tim Boma because I have heard about him. Well, I know he's a great, author and, a great evangelist in the blockchain arena, doing a great work in Canada. Well, my name is Atiq Rabbani. I have been in this industry from 1984 in Bangladesh. So I'm a pretty old hat. I was in UK before that. I was a programmer in my salad days in the Shakespearean term. But, I kind of, currently for the last 3-4 years, I've been a blockchain evangelist. And I really think Bangladesh needs to embrace blockchain in its whole entirety. Well, I have been associated with, as Karim mentioned, as a founder member of the Industry Association, Bangladesh Association of Software Information Services, and earlier Bangladesh Computer Shomiti. I was the vice president of Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm a chartered accountant. I was the president, the past president of Institute of Internal Auditors, Bangladesh. So, I have been, because of my age, I have been involved in this. And I'm really passionate about technology and the right technology, right digital technology. And I look forward to the insights from the great panelists here. Thank you.
Okay, now thank you. So that brings me to the last speaker of this panel, Professor Alim Al Islam. So Professor Alim Al Islam, is a professor at the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, the #1 engineering institution in Bangladesh. You may not know this, but a team from BUET, the university that he represents, became the West Asia champion just 3 days back at the International Collegiate Programming Contest. So Professor Alim Al Islam, would you please turn on your video so that we can all see you? Okay, there you go. So could you please introduce yourself for all the other panelists?
Yeah, thank you so much. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Yes.
Thank you so much for inviting. And it's very nice to see all the other panelists. So it's not to be humble, but to be very honest, probably I am the weakest link in this panel because I am not that much practitioner. I am actually teaching and I am doing some research. I actually did my PhD from Purdue University, USA, and then after coming back to my same institution where I have done my undergraduate and master's, I have been teaching over here in BUET. And again, the very graceful introduction by the moderator mentioning that our department and also our institution has become the West Asian Championship 3 days back. Again, from that programming perspective, I am a weakest link. So I'm not that much potent in programming too. So the only thing I'm passionate about that is research. And while doing research, as in my PhD, I did research on networking, most specifically wireless networking. I actually started some sort of research on security too after coming back over here. And when I saw the technology of blockchain, at the very beginning, I thought, like many other technologies, it will not boom, to be very honest. when I went to a conference by IBM, the conference named as Cascon in Canada, I went over there for presenting a couple of papers from our research group. I saw that there are different working groups. There are different sessions on the very same topic, that is blockchain. Blockchain, and blockchain, nothing else. So then I thought that yes, there is definitely something, because IBM is taking this technology in that way. So there must be something. Then I try to start some of my work. I have a PhD student. He is actually from the background of Bangladesh Army, but he's doing PhD in our department. He's working on blockchain, and also I have a very small group who are working on blockchain, some sort of security, privacy, and development of blockchain. So that's my own background. So not that much.
Okay, thank you.
Closer to others.
Okay, just one small correction. I'm not the moderator of this seminar. That responsibility falls on Dr. Lawrence Ma, on the able shoulders of Dr. Lawrence Ma. So he's going to moderate this seminar. I'm going to go into the background. I'm just here as the chairman of the International Blockchain Olympiad Organizing Committee 2021 and introduce all these speakers to our moderator, because he personally does not know some of the speakers. So now that all these speakers have been introduced to each other, Lawrence, it's back to you.
Okay,
please carry on.
Okay,
and Tim, thank you for joining us, this early in the morning from Canada. I hope that we get to have more interaction with you in the days ahead. So
absolutely, thanks for having me.
Okay, great.
Okay,
so Lawrence, back to you.
Okay, let me just start. Okay, so today we are very honored to have Mr. Tim Bomer from Canada. He's the senior policy analyst for identity management at the Treasury Board Secretary of Canadian government. He's an expert in identity management, knowledge management, security, and privacy. So we are very honored to have Tim as our keynote speaker for this section. I think we'll start first. We'll hear from his presentation, and afterwards we'll go to the other speakers, and then followed by questions from me and from other panelists. Okay. Let's see. Tim, can you share the screen? And let's see. Make sure that you can share your screen.
Let me see here.
Yeah. If not, I'll ask the technical team to make sure.
Yeah,
I guess
it says
not able. Can the technical team please enable all the speaker? They can share the screen.
Let me see here. Not quite yet, but
okay. Yeah. So.
I can just speak to my slide. I plan to keep my remarks very.
I think you can share now. I think.
Okay.
Team, try again.
Oh yeah, awesome. There we go.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Now I got to find which screen to share. Okay, there we go. Let me just.
Okay, we see your screen. Great.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. And I thought for the keynote I would just do like just a set of general remarks to kind of set the stage for the discussion afterwards. I didn't want to get into super amount of detail. I can talk about any of these various topics for like probably the length of this panel session, but I just wanted to set a stage. I'm presenting a deck that I did a while back to another international conference just to kind of help set the context, and I think it would be really good to understand the context that we're in to then go into the detailed conversation. And I call this presentation the perfect storm. We're in a very interesting point in time now with a variety of or a confluence of major things going on, not only within the technology industry, but also the macroeconomic environment, as well as the biological environment, like COVID-19. And so, digital identity, COVID-19, privacy, and biometrics, like those are all various hot topics today. So first of all, I just want to talk about the state of digital identity today. Keep in mind, I'm doing it from the perspective, from the Canadian perspective. So, take my remarks with a grain of salt, because everybody has a different perspective. So I'm just representing our point of view. Give you a sense of like how we've reacted to the COVID-19 response and recovery as a government and federal government. Again, I work for the federal government, and we're responsible for programs of national scope. and then talk about issues around privacy and biometrics, amongst other things. There's so many things coming to a head. There's like artificial intelligence, there's decentralization, you name it. And I hope we can cover that during the discussion. I like to try to crunch things down into very simple memes, if you will, to help me parse this out in my own brain and to actually understand the implications to help me internalize it. And this is how I've distilled it down, that we've got some, for lack of a better term, macro architectural forces happening, and it's affecting our technologies and solutions. And we're building a lot of these architectures on foundations of sand, if you will, and they do shift, and it causes changes in the dynamics of how these things are built, how they're actually procured, how they actually operate, and how they actually fail as well. And I would say over the last 50, 60 years, we've gone from like centralized systems, mainframes, databases, you name it. I'm sure there's lots of experience around the table on that. We're moving to, we have moved to what we call federated systems, which I really term multiple centralized systems. And now we're moving into sovereign, self-sovereign, decentralized systems that are starting to have a show of force in the global arena. We could talk about the Bitcoin blockchain is one of the examples, but there are many other examples too. And that's basically affecting our societies, our economies, our nation states, our organizations, and our individuals as well. Like, who knew, back in 2006, 2007, that, this upstart called Facebook would become a major threat to our democracy. It would be a major vector of misinformation. Who knew that was going to happen? Nobody knew. Who knew that Google back then, which was a search engine provider that came up with a new a new ranking algorithm, who knew that they would become such a global powerhouse? Like, nobody knew. So I think if you kind of go back, and again, I'm a big fan of history, an amateur student of history, and you realize that there's bigger things going on, and it's always good to kind of step back. And I look at this modern digital context that we're in, and I really basically dial it back to pretty much 1976 with the paper that Whitfield Diffie put out, which was around what was the genesis for the RSA algorithms, basically asymmetric cryptography, which was not considered a possibility at all until that paper was published. Mind you, the intelligence agencies probably knew about this decades before, but that's a whole other discussion. But the point is that now you had some mechanisms that you could actually provide knowledge without actually disclosing it, or proof of knowledge. And of course, the principal application was around communication, which was encryption and that. And then we all know about the issues in like the mid 90s, later 90s with the import controls, etc. And those finally went away. Now we're in a new realm where it's not about communication, but it's actually around settlement or transfer. And the first successful, maybe it's the last successful case study is the Bitcoin blockchain. But you look at it and you realize that there are some new primitives, new tools at our disposal that will take its time, but it will actually shift how we architect systems and and ultimately affect these things that I say in the bottom here. It's going to affect economies, it's going to affect states, it's going to affect governments. And frankly, we don't know, or I certainly don't know what the trajectory is. So just to set that. Up until like March of 2020, we until the pandemic really hit in our part of the world, we were moving along on this incremental pathway of desired outcomes, what we thought the future would be, better better efficiencies, all that good stuff. But then boom, we got this punch out from left field, and all of a sudden we had to send everybody home. We had to get everybody up remotely. I don't know if it was in your part of the world, but we actually had to send out like billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency benefits and retool our systems to onboard individuals very quickly, and then also be able to get funds out to them as quickly as possible. And that engendered its own set of dynamics. We actually had some very sophisticated cyber attacks against our systems that we had to counter against. And so the whole world moved online, digital, if you will. We can talk about that, but I think everybody has a good sense of that. Just coming back to our digital identity vision, that's the thing that I've been working on for years, if not more than a decade. And within Canada and the Canadian context, if you're not aware, we are a federation. Even though we look like a country, big country, second biggest country in the world in terms of territory, I'm not so sure where we fit on the overall GDP. I think we're about 8th or 9th in terms of the GDP in the world size. But internally, we are made up of a whole series of provinces and territories that have very clear divisions of power. The federal government is one of many jurisdictions. We do have authorities over, some aspects of transportation, foreign relations, immigration, etc. But by and large part, a lot of the provinces are pretty much sovereign in their own right. They're the vital statistics registrars. They do their own health. They do their own education. But we align together as a country as a whole. And that's where the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework had its genesis years ago. We always talk about not a national approach or a centralized approach. We'd always talk about a Pan-Canadian approach. So we've always been cognizant of that we need to create an approach that's not necessarily legally binding. And again, we don't have the authorities from our point of view as a federal government to mandate things to the provinces. I guess we could, but that's more a political question than a legal question. And but on the other hand, we have a lot of national scope programs, like our Employment Social Development Canada is kind of equivalent to the U.S. Social Security Administration. Of course, Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, we issue passports. We have national level programs around like spectrum management, you name it. And then of course, we collect taxes on behalf of governments. Like we not only collect it for the federal government, but we have agreements with the provinces to collect on their behalf as well. And we have a whole variety of programs that are national scope, but they actually have to work across these jurisdictions. So, we've been, before the word digital identity ecosystem was cool, like whenever we started using it, we were talking about Pan-Canadian approach. We've been working hard on coming up with an approach that enables us to actually work together as a country, recognizing the provinces and territories. Not that different than the European Union. I would submit that the European Union or the European Commission has more stronger aligning parties than we do within the Canadian context, and that's actually a good thing. It really keeps us on our toes as a federal government, and it really, at the end of the day, it actually ends up being in the overall benefit of the public interest. Just to provide you a little detail, the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, we've been working on this for several years now. And we focus on articulating key concepts and formalizing what would be in a trust framework. That's the hot word right now. You're hearing about everybody developing trust frameworks: the Australians, the Brits, the Kiwis, as well as you're seeing sector-specific ones. I guess the latest one that kind of hit the hustings was the Global Assured Identity Network. I think it was with the Open ID Foundation, which is really promoted by the financial institutions. But in a nutshell, like the elements that you have is what we call a normative core, you know, the key requirements, the key concepts that you have to work with. There is what's called a mutual recognition component for accepting trusted digital identities. We also recognize that there's always a supporting infrastructure. We've abstracted out like the technical part into what we call a supporting infrastructure. And then there's what we call a digital ecosystem roles and information flows, who the actors within the system. And again, the document, I think, is about 100 odd pages long. We've delineated as best we can from our perspective those components. And within the normative core, you know, we have things of what we call identity domains, like foundational identity, contextual identity. We define like what a person is, organization, etc. for digital representations. We've defined a whole series of what we call atomic processes. Our major interest from a federal government point of view is not so much the technology. It's really around the integrity of the program. Can we trust the program? And the program includes not only the tech, but it also includes the business processes. It includes the governance. It includes the actors involved, whether they're within government or contractors or subcontractors or you know, services that are used. You know, that's our concern, and actually that's the greater part of the assessment process. You know, we have developed an assessment approach. We've applied it. We just finished up the province of Alberta, and they went live in production in August. We finished up province of BC, and we've got the letter signed. But you know, the lesser appreciated part of the problem is that while we come up with this fancy document with all these concepts, you got to fit this into an existing traditional institutional framework, which you actually have to nudge along to say you can do your business differently. Like, yes, you do have a centralized program or a national level program, but that doesn't mean you have to stand up your own digital identity program. You can actually rely on what the provinces are doing, and we'll provide you like the policy cover, and we will help you negotiate the agreements, and we will help you like, you know, develop your expertise to actually use these services as opposed to building your own. There's always a temptation, especially with large programs, they want to build everything themselves, and that's okay, but it really is not to the benefit of the individual who, you know, is trying to get a benefit, and then they have to go through yet another identity proofing process and authentication process, and they just say, I don't understand. I'm with the province of Alberta, and I hardly interact with the federal government. Like, why am I doing this stuff all over again? So we really want to focus on, you know, the term that was used for the longest time was user-centric approach, but and now it's more a rights-based approach and centered on the individual. You know, this is an open-ended slide. In the development of our framework, we have constant touch points on biometrics. Like, we work with the privacy commissioner. We comment on guidance that they provide. I do have some very specific opinions on biometrics. We can always talk about that during the panel discussion. You know, privacy, always privacy issues, but I always caution, let's not look at privacy to the exclusion of a bunch of other issues as well. There's rights, there's other accommodations, accessibility, not to diminish privacy, but we have to look at in a greater context. Of course, question of blockchain, what the solutions are, you know, artificial intelligence, you know, we have impact assessments around that, cloud technology, so it fits in a pretty complex framework. So I won't belabor the slide, just say, you know, we're very cognizant of the environment that it's in. And yeah, these few slides are a bit of an eye chart here, a bit detailed, but at the end of the day, the work that we're doing, it really boils down to, it's about standards and certification. It's about applying standards, using standards, or actually developing standards. And this is a slide from one of our briefings to show the evolution of the framework. Like, the PCTF the work that we're doing is saying, hey, it's not a standard, it's not legislation, it's not even policy. What we're doing is all the heavy lifting to really understand the problem space, and we distill it down as best we can into a document that people can understand and apply. And then we can feed that into a standards development process. Within Canada, we're working on a national standard with the CIO Strategy Council, which is an accredited standards development organization, and taking the work that we've done and feed that into a standards process. And similarly, the work that we've done with the conformance criteria and the assessment, that will eventually evolve into like a formalized certification scheme that we may own as a government that fits under the standard, that we can actually enable like third-party practitioners to take that and apply in different contexts. And then finally, this fits into the mutual recognition, which is basically the piece that we own as government, that we have our own acceptance framework governed by our own Treasury Board policies, which we consider all this preceding work, and we provide advice on whether we are going to accept a trusted digital identity for use by government programs. And basically all this material up just leads to the due diligence that gives our senior official the ability to make a informed decision. The way I describe it in my briefings, when we brief our CTO and CIO, I said, the work that we do on the due diligence oftentimes will be the starting point if we ever have to do a incident management. If we have to react to a cyber attack, or there's something and we have an issue with our own systems or with the province or maybe one of the service providers, you name it, and I get a call from the CIO and saying, look, we're having a problem with our digital identity system, and we see it's originating from here, I might not have the answer, but I might be able to say, well, our systems aren't implicated, or they may be, or it may be from this section of this program here, or this segment. And so advise on mitigating factors, and maybe to turn off a province for a while, not necessarily the whole country, turn off a province, turn off a commercial provider, but to provide, like I would say, a surgical response to any attacks that we might have. Like the key thing, what's driving us as government, is trust. We can't have these systems be compromised. It happens. And the assessment processes that we have, we can always talk about it. We have like an assessment tool, and we don't ask the question of how unlikely something will happen. We just say the likelihood is 1, it will happen. And when it does happen, whether you think it will not happen, it will happen, because you're in that business. And how are you going to react? So just to give that. And here's just a bit of a diagram how we're just trying to fit all the pieces with our federal digital ID legislation stack, if you will. We don't have a formal digital ID legislation, but we have all these pieces in our Financial Administration Act. We have Treasury Board policies, we have directives, we have standards, and we have guidelines that we've developed over the years, if not decades. And we're trying to align it to a national standard we're developing, but also give the freedom to the provinces and territories to develop their own legislative and policy stack, if you will. And these are just the pieces here. I won't go into the details. So as well, work in progress, verifiable credentials. We're doing a lot of work in this space. I managed an innovation solutions challenge where we had 6 vendors to look at this deeply. I can send you the GitHub link where we put the public demo videos on. You can see all the work that we've done in that area. We're just about to announce phase 2 of the vendors that have won that. And we'll be going deep into this space to really understand what might be the technical interoperability issues, what are the standards that we need to be concerned with, technical standards, and how might we actually figure out this, what I would call a new architectural component, digital wallet, how it fits into the overall equation. I have opinions myself, but we need to be informed by some real like clear and present research. And this is just a diagram I've put together where I'm trying to distill down this problem space that we're in between digital identity. I also keep track of digital currency and try to distill it down to its very essence. And, you know, again, a work in progress. You know, I like to take the asymmetry out, like make an authority equal to an individual and realize that they're counterparties interacting with one another. And then these are just some of the elements. The thing is, I think it's really important to really tease out your biases and assumptions, because if you don't understand that, or you're going in with a certain bias, like government's more powerful or individuals are more powerful or certain segments more powerful, then you actually unintentionally architect your solutions to kind of maybe sometimes even enable or even worsen a problem that you set out to solve. So I'm really big on doing like the key thinking. So when we articulate policy instruments and policy requirements, it stands on like some solid thinking. I'll leave it at that. You know, some open-ended conclusions. It's not just about the technology. It's about direction, alignment, strategy, and developing policy and frameworks that best serve our outcomes. You know, I'm a big proponent of be aware of your unintended consequences. Like you think, you know, for example, someone say, let's do QR codes for everything. It's like, well, it's not about the QR code. It's about, you know, it's about presenting information or ensuring that's a holder. And then if you say it's QR codes for everything, then maybe you're painting yourself into a corner. So that's the kind of, those are the kind of discussions that I have. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand it back to you, Lawrence. So I hope that was useful.
Okay. First, thanks, Tim, for your very informational and inspiring talk. Okay, so and that sort of set the stage for our discussion coming up. So let me first begin by saying that actually in Hong Kong, which I'm based, we just did a POC on a digital identity project, but that's for a corporate, for a company. So yeah, so they, I know there are a lot of projects that deal with personal, but we did a corporate identity. The Hong Kong government, they want to, one of the pain point they want to, that's come from the finance sector, for the banks, especially with the COVID-19. I mean, a lot of people don't want to go to the bank branch to open an account. So they would be talking about this sort of online account opening. So they have virtual banks in Hong Kong, and even the traditional bank. So they have been quite successful in doing a online personal account opening. So it might involve taking a selfie and all these things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to corporate, they were stuck. That's because in corporate, you need to have either an original copy of your certificate of incorporation or certified true copy, and then at some point you have to go into the branch. Okay. And so that's why the use case we're exploring is whether we can have some issuer, and in this case, maybe the company registry, because they are the one currently responsible for giving out this certificate of incorporations, to be have some kind of a digital corporate identity, where then you can use that to for a company to prove its legal existence. Plus, we also talk about whether they can bind the director of the company, because the director, obviously, organization is such a subject, but you have to need the people who are the director and the staff. Okay, so and so that was the thing that we did. And then one thing we find out is this a POC? We find out that the discussion seems to be that the challenging is maybe 30% of the challenge on the technology, but the other rest is on the governance and the trust framework.
Yeah,
I think that is. I think the government recognized that. Hong Kong MA, which is the central bank, also recognized that, and we spent a lot of time looking at different kind of framework. In particular, we were studying the Pancake, the Canadian Trust Framework, the PCTF, where where Tim just talked about sort of giving the framework that described one thing that was the so-called the trust level of certain credential or identity. And one of the interesting thing that was in the discussion is I guess this is the key, is that this triangle that Tim showed, this trust triangle, where you have an issuer issue something to, let's say, a holder. Holder in this case, we're thinking about a company or corporation.
Yeah.
And the verifier, in this our use case, would be think of a bank. Let's say the whole company wants to open a bank account online. Okay, so the bank want to verify certain credential of the company. The question the bank came up. I mean, we did a few workshops with the bank to get the POC was done in concurrent with all the banks in Hong Kong, all the big banks like HSBC, Bank of China, Standard Chartered. And one of the questions the bank came is that why would they trust this credential? And then I think the boils down to they say, okay, if the issuer is the company registry, yeah, I think I will trust them because we are anyway in this current world. I mean, that's how the company get the certificate was given by the company registry. And now, but then they will add that, okay, if Hong Kong MA say this, okay, we're happy. So they always say, okay, if the regulator says okay, we'll fine. So that is sort of the thing that was that the trust level, that why would a verifier believe in a certain identity credential? It's very, very important. I think Tim would probably agree with that.
Yeah, we discovered that, like, my focus has always been on the person and the individual, and I think we understand that problem well. Of course, there's issues around who actually registers the individual, whether it's a vital statistic registrar, you know, as a civil register, et cetera, that. But organizations is a lot trickier, and we're still having these existential debates of what an organization is like. And I wouldn't say we have resolved it. And we actually had some interesting discussions just this past week with my principal co-author, Dave, who's Dave Roberts, who's been working on it more closely on the corporate register side. They did like an initial assessment of a corporate registrar using the PCTF. I don't know if that work is public, but I can see what we can provide. It's pretty interesting. Like, one thing you find is that, you know, the trust framework or these notions are not well applied to organizations. And the other thing too is that I don't know if it's the same where you are, but, you know, these processes have evolved as an adjunct to, like, just registration processes, tax registration processes, and usually the elements of proof are actually pretty low, if not non-existent. So, and, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for malfeasance here, right? Because it's easy to set up a fictional organization, if you will. And then there's the other side, like, you know, to become a corporation, you have to be, you know, you go to your federal or provincial corporate registrar, you have to have like the directors and that. So there's more rigor there. So there's a couple of things. Like, there's an issue, like, an organization itself can't go up to a front desk. Like, an organization, it's a fictional thing. It's basically, it's what's called a legal fiction. It's basically something in our minds, something in our imagination. You have like federal corporations, provincial corporations, you have proprietorships, you have unregistered organizations, you have associations, and that. We were debating this, saying, well, what actually defines an organization? And one of the things that we're bandying about was this idea: an organization, for the purposes of legal enforcement, if you will, or legal recognition, is that it has the ability to have a balance sheet, meaning to hold an asset or a liability. And maybe that's the test, but, you know, we're just kind of figuring that out. But that aside, the other thing that became totally important, that when we started to address organizations, we realized, quote unquote, relationships was really important too, because the only way you animate an organization is that there has to be an owner, a proprietor, a director, or an agent acting on behalf of the organization. Like, yeah, sure, the organization can have a balance sheet and can assume liabilities and assets, but someone's got to provide some animus to that organization, and that's going to be an individual. And then you have to tie them back to how they relate to the organization. And again, we found there it was wholly insufficient a lot of the processes, and like I don't want to go too much in detail. It's a real opportunity for like interesting stuff to go on, and I can recognize why governments, and ourselves included, are very interested in like kind of solidifying this as well. Our focus has been on individuals, or my focus. We have to very quickly figure out the organization stuff as well, especially now in this context where, you know, boundaries, jurisdictional boundaries are very permeable, and there's a way, you know, you can conduct transactions across the international context. And I know there's some work being done with what's called the Global Legal Identifier Foundation. I know there's some promising work there, but I'll leave it at that. So maybe a very long non-answer, but hopefully there's something there.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that the bank actually were very interested is whether this whole thing can address the question of they have someone come in and say they represent a particular corporation. They claim they're the director, but they say how do I know whether he's a director? How can I prove it?
Yeah.
Or maybe he was a director yesterday, but he got fired today. I mean, I don't have any kind of timely kind of update. So that was some of the issue that being discussed. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go to the other panelists and see if they listen to what they want to say about this topic and maybe comments or things. Maybe let me go to maybe Mr. Ramani. I mean, can you please? I know.
Sure. Yeah. Can I use the screen as well?
Sure. You can use. Can you share the screen? I think you should.
I've got few.
Can you? I think you should be able to share the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, I've got a few things to say, so I thought I'd put it up on the slides as well. I mean, sure. I mean, in the Bangladeshi context, I mean, we have our NID system, and we are a young country in the sense that, I mean, digitalization is, of course, the aim is to become a digital Bangladesh, but we have a long way to go. With that backdrop, I mean, well, identity and privacy, of course, are the fundamental rights of each individual. And we are very keen on achieving SDG goals. SDG goals by 2030. 16.9 says every individual must have a birth registration and an identity. And of course, by 2030, we also have to have a system in which no one is left behind in terms of opportunity, left behind in terms of right, left behind in terms of all kinds of things. So, we need to achieve that. It's a tall wish, but how do we achieve this in a dignity and a privacy preserving way? Well, identity is good, but it can turn sour if it leads to identification for some malevolent purposes. We need to guard against the invasion. Well, ours is a digital world. There is no going away from this. So, I mean, we cannot go back to a world in which cash is king, because cash is the most private thing one can use. No one knows, what you're doing with it. But, the times have changed. So, but we need to be very careful. We need to be careful of the company we keep. We need to be careful about the technology we adopt. What good technology, what good is technology if it steals my identity, my privacy, hacks my data, my mind? So far, we have, in my opinion, although the mainframes, the PCs, the networking, the software, the internet, Web 1.10, 2.0, we have had, all kinds of wonderful things. It has changed the world, but still we are in a world of vanity digitization. Data is hacked, it's manipulation it's pro-tampering. So blockchain, I think, has ushered in some kind of sanity digitization. The man's quest to be free has yo-yoed over times, from the ancient times. Long time ago, we used to have little villages where if there were 100 people, they would all know which land belonged to whom. So that was the basis of blockchain idea. The advent of technology, the computer, the software excited us, but their dark face shocks us. Data breaches, computer system hacking abounds. Internet changed the world. You know, Web 1.0, the static web, 2.0, the dynamic web, through which Facebooks and the Googles came, excited us. But Dr. Alexander Kogan, a Moldovan American, a young American, he was an ex-Cambridge, a lecturer in psychology, a data scientist, worked for Cambridge Analytica and shocked us. He produced an app in 2012 or 13. This is your digital life. And, you know, Facebook users could be harvested. And, you know, what they did was to do a psychographic profiling. It's like a demographic profiling. What is my habit? What do I think? For manipulation, manipulating the presidential election of the USA, the seat of democracy. So in one hand, technology has given us so much, but it has taken away a lot. So we need, coming back to identity, we need identity. Of course, you know, it's sometimes good to be forgotten, but we need identity to get access to the services. But a sovereign identity which will be controlled by me, not like Facebook or the Googles where I, you know, give my data. The custody is them. They're privy to all my information. They can actually use it. So data is the new oil. If, for example, we had no-name accounts in our banks, if you lived in a society, maybe it's an ultra-communist society where you would all work, but our earnings would be deposited to a central authority. That central authority, we could call it FANG, of course. So that central authority would give us in return some shelter, some food. Would that be okay? It's not going to be okay. With data, we are in a similar situation. So blockchain and its current evolutions must be deployed to protect everything, protect our privacy, to give us sovereign identity. Of course, we all know about blockchain, but you know, blockchain has to be really drummed into the policymakers' mind, and blockchain is evolving. There are problems in blockchain. There are trilemma in blockchain. Decentralization guarantees security, but at the cost of speed of execution. But things are changing. Well, innovations are happening. The system will get better iteratively. And of course, you know, in this line, I must say, I'm a little believer of, you know, public blockchain, because a blockchain which is kind of a decentralized, that has to be our aim. Private blockchains are okay, but private blockchains, of course, you know, it's like a stopgap. But you know, we must think how we can actually evolve our public blockchain systems with interoperability, with scaling up, and of course, private channels to suit our needs. For example, for our national ID, I think we must have a system where we are anchored to a public blockchain so that this ID becomes unhackable. In our country, IDs, you know, they remove the head and they make it somebody else's ID. Although, you know, it's a digital ID, digitally produced ID. So we need to do much better. So point 4, where systems are lacking, blockchain must be embraced in all earnest. For countries like us, where systems are really not really matured, not talk about, say, in Canada or in Japan, even a cash system will still works, because, you know, you have the system in which people who use cash, to buy cash, to sell cash, they can give representations to the tax authority in a befitting manner. But you see, countries like ours in a developing field, we need to have a system which is not at the discretion of human beings. And unfortunately, you know, if the centralized systems, like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the power of centralization tend to corrupt, and our people, you know, have discretions on the wrong end. So we need to have, because we have blockchain-like system which can actually, you know, algorithmically can do many things. If a technology can do things better than human beings, it is our prerogative to embrace it. And how, you know, there might be problems, but iteratively we will get better. It'll be, we have to have a digitalized system. So blockchain-based decentralized identity and privacy system needs a solid blockchain-based governance structure. In Bangladesh, we have a strategy paper. We have done a lot of things. We are doing this international blockchain Olympiad. We're doing, but the core thing has to be done. The governance, the public accounting has to be put on a kind of a blockchain. What is blockchain? It's shared governance, it's collaborative governance, it's a team game, it's an open, transparent system, it's a collective maintenance system. So we need that for good governance. And good governance will ensure that we can achieve our SDG goals by 2030, leaving no one behind, identity and all. So in the end, blockchain to me is a humanizing technology. We talk about AI, IoT, virtual reality, augmented reality, deep learning, machine learning, full of data, explosion of data. But who gives authenticity to data? Blockchain can give authenticity to data. So blockchain is a technology, through algorithm, the trust is acquired. To me, it is a freedom technology. It is a truth technology. And to me, it is also we shall overcome technology. We must understand this. Our policymakers must understand this. The country must understand this. We are not Canada. We are not USA. We are not Japan. Those who have very robust system as it is. Blockchain for us is mandatory. We must use it for our own emancipation. And I have a tagline which says, this chain is not that chain. That chain enslaves, this chain liberates. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bani, for your interesting comments. Yes, you're right. I think you also see with Tim's presentation, you see the identity has been evolving from a very centralized to a federated, and now to this. So you in a centralized and federated kind of, it's true that you don't control your identity. People like Facebook, like you have a Facebook login, Facebook can take away everything, right? Then you lose everything, right? We just ban you from Facebook. So I think this now this trend towards this self-sovereignty. We want people, the user, to manage your identity. I think that is how we see the trend.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is, I absolutely agree. But yeah, thank you. Let's go to maybe Mr. Bagapula. Maybe can you comment? Give your say something about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have first need to understand that technology comes with rewards and drawbacks, and this is something we have to accept. Like every society has its own need and own capabilities, which requires to be tuned for use of these new technologies which are coming in. For us, we have taken various strategies and various policies to implement, and then we also have regulations come in. So one of the regulations that is coming in is that controller of verification authority, a new authority which will have multiple verification authority who will do the identity verifications for various services, so that you are not captive to one service provider. You will have many multiple service provider. You can have the identity verification for various e-services through them. Most importantly, the eKYC, which is being widely used by the banks and other authorities for verification of identity. And another thing is that we are now working on a Bangladesh Data Privacy Act. So we are looking at it in a different angle. Most of all the acts that we have seen is targeting only the individual privacy, not the juristic person privacy. So we are looking at a provision or the way how juristic person can also be incorporated within the law, so they are also protected in the Data Protection Act that is coming in. And the other thing that what we are looking at is that we will be looking at the cloud policies and also the where the data are hosted outside the country. So we are looking at classifying the data. So which data can be taken, can be stored out on the cloud, which is not resident in Bangladesh, but some area which can the data cannot leave Bangladesh. So we are, it's a very tedious job. We cannot say overnight that these are the data which can go out or which can be put on the hybrid cloud. And so these are the areas we are exploring. We are looking at it from the technology perspective and also from the legal perspective. The other issue is that if we make the privacy and identity very strict, uh, the foreign direct investment which are moving away from which are coming to Bangladesh, and there are investment like which is in China. Many of them are moving out to Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries. So we would like them to come to Bangladesh as well. So in that case, the foreign direct investment is just like a Siberian bird. They fly in when the environment is good, and they fly out as soon as the environment is not good. So we don't want to make it such a stringent law that will drive away all the foreign direct investment. We also have to look into the area that we are a small country, but maybe we have a very big population and the density is very high, and and there are a lot of young people coming out from the universities. They need jobs. So the government alone cannot provide all the jobs that is needed. So we need private investment, and the government is focusing on establishing uh, economic zones and high-tech parks, software technology parks where the foreign investment can come in. So you see the economy and the investment, everything is integrated with the identity, privacy, blockchains, and everything. So we will definitely look forward for such webinars and maybe physical consultations to ensure that we come up with a positive policy which could be a drive, which will drive our economy faster, and our goal is to become a developed country by 2040. So we would like to see that we do achieve our goals that has been set by the government. So there are a lot of ifs and buts coming in. So I don't. I think whatever the discussion is coming out, I am taking note of it, and I hope that after this cloud conference, if there can be a publication of all the discussions in the webinars and the recommendations, if it can come out in a printed form, that can, the government can use that to formulate new policies and guidelines for, so that so the privacy, identity, blockchains, artificial intelligence are all acceptable and for the good of or the benefit of the country. So this is something important. But as you know, the Cambridge Analytica reference has come up. I can only say that there are at least many Cambridge Analytica uh, prototype running in the country for various analyses. So they need it and they are doing it, but it's not. But whatever they do it for many reasons and many purposes. Some of these analytics are being used to forecast the stock market, so how to make more profit from the stock market and how to pump up the price of the prices of the negligible stocks. So there are a lot of things that the young people are doing it. And as you know, the Pegasus, the software which has a lot of talks in the uh, news media. So many young engineers and computer science from computer science and others are encouraged to make such to experiment and build similar software in the country, and it's also in other countries. They are encouraged because they see that it has a big potential to earn quick money and also make the company more profitable. So a lot of things are happening in Bangladesh and all over the world. So let's make sure that whatever we do, whatever legislation that comes in, takes into account of all the things those are happening in the country or globally, is accommodated and make sure that it helps Bangladesh and the people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gupta, for your comments and remarks, which were very interesting. But by the way, there was the thing you mentioned about people looking for jobs, or I know in Bangladesh, you do a lot of outsourcing on the internet. So actually, when I was in Bangladesh, I had this discussion with your government, I guess together with Kareem, about using this technology to come up with some kind of skill passport, so you can have some the student or the will have someone will a credential, a skill credential, not just in their university study, but whatever skill they have, then someone can issue them this that someone that trusted an entity and can issue this for them, and then they can have this with them, and they can show it to anyone. They can verify that they indeed they have certain skill. So that was being sort of discussed, whether that kind of thing will be that Bangladesh may want to produce such a thing using this kind of technology.
Yes, in our country we have a skills development authority.
Right, exactly.
They certify the skills, and we have put in place a online testing service, which is now on beta version. We are working on it. So by December it will be online, so people can get national certification on particular skill sets. Thank you.
Yeah. But I guess the idea is whether we can bring this forward, where you can actually have your credential, maybe put it on your mobile phone, and then you can go anywhere and anywhere, then people can sort of verify your credential. Yeah.
As you know, our SIM and also our mobile phone IMI numbers are already in a database. So if somebody takes my mobile phone anywhere in the world, our regulator can send that message to the over there and can detect the phone is a stolen phone, so it can be blocked. So the globally ITU is coordinating it, and we have already implemented it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Maybe we come to Professor Islam. Maybe you want can you maybe say a few words about this topic?
Yeah, I want to have a couple of slides for presentation, but before that, if the moderator, if you permit, I don't actually refrain. I can't refrain myself to have a couple of questions.
You cannot share your screen?
No, not that problem. At the very beginning, I have to have a couple of questions to team, if you permit.
Okay.
Can I have my questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the questions are to team. So I have seen his career, an excellent, experienced policymakers having some blending with technologies. That's great. To me, it's a kind of very rare. So I have just two questions. The first thing, so you have worked on standards and developments and policies. So how do you actually develop the standards and how the policies are evolved? That's number one. And number two, so you have a lot of developments based on technology. So which is actually trusting or which is actually pushing the development, the technology or the people or anything else? So these are the two questions, Steve.
Yeah, sure. Standards development. What's very interesting is that you're seeing the focus on quote unquote standards now. Like governments have been pushing very hard, especially our government over the past number of years, saying that we need standards-based approaches, we want to use open source software. And so what's happened is that you have these variety of standards organizations. You've got ISO, you've got the W3C, you've got the IATF, you've got, you name it. There's a lot of standards organizations out there. We also have within Canada, we have what's called the Standards Council of Canada, our national standards oversight organization that actually exists by federal statute. The thing that we've learned is that you have to be very careful in who actually develops the standards, because you actually have to have an understanding of who are the players and what are the interests involved in developing these standards, and when they're being developed, no doubt the standards are to help the market, but also it may unnecessarily advantage certain vendors or certain blocks of vendors. And so the approach that we're taking in Canada is that we're being much more careful now. We're working on a standard for digital credentials, digital trust and identity. But what we've done is through our Standards Council of Canada, which not only does IT standards, it's standards for food safety, automotive safety, you name it. We are ensuring that we have a very rigorous governance process in place, and that we actually have an open and inclusive process, not only in the committees, but also the technical committees, so we can actually develop stuff that's in the public interest. It's not to diminish the standards that are developed by the industry bodies. They're in and of themselves valuable for developing the market. There's motivations to get products to market, absolutely, for sure. But you also have to look at it from the point of view of public interest as well. So it's a very, very delicate balance. I'd say you have to spend a lot of energy. If you just can't say this standards organization, this is the one that we should be following. Like, you hear things through the industry and through other government contacts about, what you might accept at face value for a standard. I'm not going to single anyone out or single any organization out, but then you understand that there's some vested interests that are developing it in a way that serves their purpose. So you actually have to understand that. I think if I remember, your second question is around the technology versus the standards. It's very much a symbiotic approach. The thing that I learned, this is a long time ago, when we did not have any policies around levels of assurance or identity. You've got to get right in there in the operational initiatives and really understand what's going on, really understand how things are being solved at the technical level, or how it's being addressed at the technical, like in the system level, and kind of step back and say, how might this apply more generally? And so I would always say, kind of somewhat glibly, that I was an embedded policy analyst. I'd get in there with the technology folks to not so much to want to build the solution, but I need to understand it. Again, I'm an engineer by training. I don't believe in magic, but I believe in understanding the components and the pieces, so that when we need to fit them into a larger picture, I kind of know what the limits are, where things might go wrong. And I find that training served me very well in doing the standards development. And oftentimes, when you then articulate the requirement, it's more enduring. Like, so for example, like someone might say, well, you need biometrics. Okay, well, what's biometrics actually giving you? It's basically, it's what we call a confirmation method for biological or physiological behavior. As well, if you start looking at it, it's not about facial recognition or fingerprint recognition. It's basically, you've got like a probabilistic method that's giving you some sort of confidence interval, and you're making an accept or reject decision on that. And once you abstract it to that level, you're no longer talking about biometrics. It's just a method. You're actually talking about, now we've got to put a process in our system that's ultimately probabilistic. And so that means there's always a likelihood that it's going to be wrong. And that's just a fact of life. And then you have to work it through and like figure out the tolerances, and also figure out, the environments that you introduce these probabilistic methods. You know, there's issues with fingerprints, there's issues with facial recognition, so on and so forth, performance issues. So now you brought the discussion to a different level, and then you can actually standardize at a different level, as opposed to saying, well, we need to do this algorithm or that algorithm. No, it's basically, you know, maybe you can say, well, it's about creating a probabilistic digest within a confidence interval. Let's use some statistical and saying, you know, that's what we're looking for. And then prove that your method, regardless of what technology is, that it actually meets that, as opposed to some criteria that might be too specific. So I don't know if that answers your question there, but those are my key points.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. Great to hear those answers. So, Tim, can I share my screen?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Just 2 or 3 slides, very summarized thing.
I think, yeah, please. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
If I'm not wrong, the panel discussion is all about blockchain, security, and privacy, but that's a too big topic. So I want to have a focus on 2 parts, just 2 parts. So if we think about the whole ecosystem, there is technology in one side and people in the another side. And in between those two, there are governments, there are corporate organizations, militaries, and many things. So I want to talk about just the upper part and the lower part, that is the technology and the people, and definitely from the perspective of mostly security and privacy. So if I think about blockchain from my own very brief understanding, even though it's a kind of very dramatic technology, but it's a kind of delicate mix of many existing technologies. For example, hashing, then digital signatures, then consensus algorithms. These are some already known things, but blockchain has brought all of them together in a very delicate manner, in such a way that it can serve many different applications in a secure way, having some sort of trust over the stakeholders. And there are also some assistive technologies, for example, AI, big data, and IoT. There are so many things, but I've just pointed these 3 things because they are closely linked with blockchain. And also there could be some sort of disruptive technology, that is quantum computing. Why I am saying that disruptive, I'm just elaborating in a brief manner. So from the perspective of these things, if we talk about security and privacy, we need to think about the assistive ones. Also, we need to think about the disruptive ones, because any security or privacy breach from any of the assistive technologies will eventually come into blockchain. For example, if there is any hack in the big data or IoT and that is linked to blockchain, eventually the whole system might have some sort of hacking, might have some sort of threatening. So the assistive technologies, in many of the cases I have seen that blockchain is considered in isolation, but probably from my own brief experience, I have understood that blockchain should be treated with its assistive technologies. If it is implemented in one case, what are the other ones? They are forming the complete ecosystem, having blockchain in that ecosystem. So we need to think all about them, probably in isolation, probably in combination, in different ways. And also the blockchain, the basis of blockchain, it has hashing, it has digital signatures, but with the development of quantum computing, even then it is under argument till now. We are not very sure how secure they will be in near future, for example, after 5 or 10 years, because we all know that very secure algorithms like RSA, many of the researchers are thinking that probably they are in under threat, or at least going to be under threat within the next couple of years with the advancement of quantum computing. And I actually felt very, very happy to see that when I went to the conference of IBM, they are one of the pioneers in quantum computing. They are also talking and thinking about blockchain, and probably they are blending the ideas, because whenever a threat is coming from another part of the world, we need to be prepared for that too, because quantum computing is probably going to be a major part in technology after 5 or 10 years. So anything coming from that side, we need to be prepared about that. So just deploying blockchain and not considering these assistive technologies and disruptive technologies probably might not be good from the perspective of security and privacy. So this is related to technology. And what about the other part, that is people? So the question I have just had to Tim, and great answer from Tim. So every development should be kind of symbiotic, if I have understood correctly. So the development that could be technology based, because over the period of time, the world has been seeing many new technologies coming and going, penetrating the life of people and eventually going and having its successor and so on. But should we have the development only the basis on the technology, or we need to have some sort of development that is completely based on our own needs? So that, I think that's a critical question that we need to focus first. And in case of blockchain, the question is nothing different, because how we should take the development part of blockchain in different countries. For example, from the perspective of Canada, it is one thing, but from the perspective of developing countries like Bangladesh and many other countries, at least for many countries in Africa, this could be completely different, radically different. I'm not very sure about that, but this is my gut feeling. And also the development and security perspectives in Bangladesh, that is probably completely different whatever we are seeing in North America. For example, I have some brief experiences for working with the people who represent the lowest echelon in the society. For example, the beggars, the street children, the slum dwellers, refugees. I have worked with them, and I have seen that the concept of development is probably something radically different to them. Also, the concept of security, for example, in developed countries, for example, in USA, sharing a smartphone is probably thought as a breach of security, just sharing. But look at in Bangladesh, in one family, 5 members, 6 members, 7 members, all are the family members, they are sharing just only one phone. The same concept of security, whenever it is traveling from USA to Bangladesh, the concept is getting to be completely changed, radically changed. So whenever we are talking about development or security from the perspective of any technology, including blockchain, we need to focus on the space we're working. This kind of one perspective, but in future, I'm not sure how that is going to be addressed beyond borders, because people now are traveling, and after COVID-19, even though I am in BD, I am interacting with you from different parts of the world. So probably the border is kind of probably virtual, not physical. So in this kind of situations, I don't know what will be the definition of development and security, because that depends on different spaces, but the borders that define the spaces, that is probably going to be vanished out. So the definition probably that need to be redefined. So that's all from me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for your Professor, for your comments. So I think one point you bring up is this cross-border. I think one of the things that people talk about in the digital identity, one of the key features that whether we can achieve interoperability, because no one believes that there will be one company like Google that will dominate the whole digital identity world. There will be different people. There will be different people making software technology. I mean, so the question is whether all these things can be interoperable. For example, a digital identity that is issued in Hong Kong using a particular software wallet, and I bring this to the US or Canada, in the US, can they, right, over their side, using their wallet or whatever, can verify. So I think maybe I'd like to ask this question maybe to Tim. I think you mentioned in your talk about this international partnership. Are there any foreseeable plan to any kind of initiative that there might be a kickoff, like to talk about, like you have different part of the world, I mean, for the interoperability of the digital identity?
Yeah, so there are discussions happening. Like Canada, we're a member of what's called the Digital Nations.
Right.
I participated in the proceedings for UNCITRAL on the model law for identity management. There are some other groups like the G20, the World Bank, like there's lots of stuff going on. And also we have bilateral discussions with various countries, as well as like with the European Union. We talk to our friends to the South, the US, etc. You know, interoperability, everybody's talking about interoperability. And, you know, I would say there's two aspects to it. There's what I call practical interoperability and ideal interoperability. Everybody's pushing for ideal interoperability, of course, on their own terms. And so, you have to look at it from the point of view of practical interoperable and kind of be modest in our goals. And again, this is me speaking not on behalf of the government, just kind of my own experience. Like a lot of the stuff has to be just proven out through proofs of concepts and just evolution. You just take a look at examples before us, history before us is, IP version 4. It basically evolved. I would say really what enabled that to take off, IP version 4, was the introduction of the notion of gateways, and that enabled it to scale. So there were some concepts in there that enabled IP version 4 to really take off, subnet, so on and so forth. And then everything was built on top of that. So there's some really good work going on and trying to conceptualize at a minimum what we need to interoperate. There's the Trust Over IP Foundation is doing good stuff, Decentralized Identity Foundation, W3C. So, I take a look at this and I say to myself, what's the absolute minimum thing we need to actually, to enable interoperability? And again, my current thinking is that I'm pretty excited about the notion of decentralized identifiers. And again, the W3C has done some great leading work on this, but you take a close look at it and you realize that there's some more fundamental concepts in there that have been around for a long time, like being able to generate your own identifier in a high entropy environment, and then basically associating like cryptographic material to a relatively persistent identifier and who the registrar and that. So I think there's some really promising concepts there that you can actually introduce into the global ecosystem, the idea of an identifier that can be backed by an issuer, which then can actually prove authenticity, whether it be digital signatures or you name it. And that's going to become the basis of this verifiable credential ecosystem. I think the other thing I've included is, there's nothing wrong with this. Oftentimes with the innovations, you'll see a lot of enthusiasm to really build out and try to do a bunch of things at the same time. And like one of the concerns that we had with the identifiers, the decentralized identifiers, is the term of what we called ledger lock. Does that mean we have to commit to a ledger? Does that mean that we have to commit to an association, however trustworthy they are, to their ledger, to their association? And there's, without naming any specifics, there's been some very successful organizations or foundations that set up to do that. But then when we kind of turned over this issue around decentralized identifiers, we realized it didn't have to be associated with a ledger. There was other techniques to do it. So that's the kind of hard research that we need to do as governments to understand. When I come back to that practical global interoperability, I don't know what the answer is yet, but really to move forward in a deliberate and incremental way. And then once we get that nailed down, then we can move on to what the next piece is. So, just a lesson that I've learned over the years is focus on a small victory that can actually cause like an outsized effect. When we started this journey years ago in standardization, we separated what we called at the time, separated the identity from the credential, meaning let's separate out authentication from identification. And that enabled us to outsource or contract out to commercial providers the authentication process without regard to the identity piece. And that kind of unlocked some value in the ecosystem. And I think that's what we have to really spend a lot of time to understand is how can we decouple these things in a way that's going to unlock value going forward. I don't have the answers, but kind of got a sense in my gut, if you will, that we just have to be very careful and deliberate. And a lot of times these what might look like a simple innovation or maybe trivial may actually cause like a revolution.
Okay. I have another question, like maybe any I can answer it. Is that I think first maybe to Tim first. I mean, you mentioned in your slide about the Canadian vision of the identity. what do you see are the challenge that make it happening, or how we can overcome that? And is there any kind of time frame you
Yeah.
think?
So I class the challenges or risks. I've classed them into 3 levels. One is what I call vendor lock-in, just being locked into solutions. I think we're managing that risk through like focusing on standards and making sure the governance of those standards are solid, so we don't get locked into the solutions. Like I think everybody's doing that. The next set of challenges, what I call our risks, are around ecosystem fragmentation. Like we may develop something that works great for public sector services, but may not work in the private sector context. It might not work for banking. It might not work for, whatever. So that's a harder thing to address because you have to align various communities, each in their own interests. But that's a broader risk that's tougher to manage, and the only way you can really manage that is have active conversations between the communities and say, hey, what you're doing in the telco world is not that dissimilar to what's happening in the financial world. It's not dissimilar what's happening in the government world, but that requires a lot of what I would say political capital to bring that together. And then the third class of risks are more existential, which I'm calling the platform capture risks, which you have these major platforms, you know who they are, that just come along and just say, oh, you just have to do it this way because you got our phones, you got our systems, and this is how we've decided to do it. That became pretty apparent with the exposure notification apps, and you basically were told that you can only have 1 app per country, and we'll work with you, but it's you got to do it in our terms. And so it really raised my sort of sensitivity on that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but just I added some of my thoughts there. It's a long journey with small victories.
But any time frame you sort of see maybe it will be like what? Let's see what let's say we take in 3 or 5 years. What do you want to see?
I'm not even going to estimate time frames because, as I said, with COVID-19, basically, we talked about like working from home, teleworking, blah blah blah, and doing that, and we achieved within like 3 months probably what we had set out to do in 5 years.
Yep, right.
And actually, I did provide some notes on some other things. I said, I was asked a similar question. I said, I don't know, because what happens is that you might have some event that occurs that just accelerates this stuff as quickly as possible. So it's almost like you have to be ready. The time frames are really not focused on the capability. It's more around the will to do things and the urgency. And I would say there were some events that are more recent events that have really opened the eyes of people developing these digital identity systems. Like again, the big thing that is really the international community, humanitarian community is focused on is what happened in Afghanistan with the pullout, and then these digital identity systems that were there ostensibly for the safety and security of the individuals being actually used by another regime. And so then people are realizing, we have to look at this a little bit differently. So I'm not even going to estimate timeframes.
Okay. Other panel have any questions or anything you want to discuss? So
can I just ask Tim about, blockchain, the philosophy and its full manifestation is in a public blockchain. We must, in my mind, I could be wrong, but in my mind, I think we should focus and our energies and our thoughts to having something pretty much like a public chain in every sphere. May not be immediately appropriate because corporations and things like that, so private and a consortium. But you see, I mean, unless we have a system in which decentralization can play its full part, and we have disintermediation, we have the empowering of people that we seek. I mean, so although it is not a smooth journey, but the world's energy must be put in that direction. I mean, do you agree? Or because I'm not really, private blockchains fine, but I mean, really, this is the spirit of the chain.
Yeah, well, a private blockchain is just another database, and I agree with you completely. And I think you're having the emergence of like a new realm, the digital realm, which is kind of like the good analogy is like the open seas or the high seas, and you can have some effect when you're in your own vessel on that high sea, but you actually are subject to the the forces of nature as well as international treaties. So I think we have to start thinking about it in that respect. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's like the way I've been describing, there's a new macroeconomic force, or there's a new macro force that we have to come to terms with. I'm not even going to speculate how that's going to turn out. But I'm turning back to kind of history to see if there's any precedent. And and again, this is just me speaking. I see governance structures maybe, or potential governance structures, kind of turning back to remanifesting themselves from the pre-modern nation state. I think we're operating with a lot of 20th century assumptions or late 19th century, 20th century assumptions that may no longer hold. So I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting governance work. I think we now have the what I call the enabling technology. As I said, it really boils down to those one-way functions, discrete logarithms, the elliptic curves. Now you're getting the post-quantum stuff, and I think touching upon one of the prior presentations is that the blockchain that we're speaking of is a delicate balance of those technologies brought together into a scheme, and who knows what other delicate balances might be created that could have like outsized impacts. I think that's the most fascinating aspect of this, because it actually changes the balance of power. And in many ways, this actually brings it back towards the individual in real terms, not in we promise to do this or promise to that, or it's value based or whatever. You now have hard cryptographic controls in place that nobody can actually compromise. So I think there's a lot of really interesting work to be had in that space, and I'm only beginning to try to understand the implications myself.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I mean, with quantum, you have quantum safe. You'll have quantum safe cryptography, I'm sure. I think so. Of course, the things will come, but we will have to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, and if I can add, like, we probably have like another 20 to 30 years before we really have to worry about quantum stuff.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like fear and uncertainty, doubt stuff, and similar with artificial intelligence too. Like, I totally agree in the capabilities and that, but a lot of times you're using systems that you didn't know how to code yourself, and so you have to understand it from an empirical point of view. So yeah, I get it that there's like misapplications and nefarious applications of those technologies, but that's basically it's not that different than like regulating hazardous substances. And I think sure. There has to be a lens put on that not all technology is in its application is positive. There's downsides. I think there's understanding in that now that's happening, and we got to let the conversation kind of turn itself on its own debates. And just again, it's really it's a link between public policy and technology, and they're not two solitudes.
Right. Thank you.
Of course, cryptographers are working on this so-called quantum resistant right? New way to do signature, or new way to do encryption. I mean, NIST is going to ask for the. I mean, they're looking for the next standard, right? I mean, there are proposals yeah. So the quantum play is interesting because we talked to the people. There was I don't know if you heard this joke. I mean, the joke was that we talked to the quantum computer people. They always say that the quantum computer will be ready in 10 years time. So 10 years ago they say it's 10 years time. Now they say 10 years time. I don't know. But maybe not. Maybe. But I don't think it's ready now. I mean, because to able to break those RSA using this Shaw algorithm, it's a very challenging engineering problem. They need to have engineering enough qubit to do that. The other thing I want, because since we talk about privacy, we have all this GDPR and all these things. So the thing I want to ask is how would this digital identity, how will it match with the GDPR? Will it help resolve? Yeah.
Sure. I can comment from my perspective. Yeah. It has shifted my perspective of digital identity. I look at it not from an enabling point of view, like for enabling better access, seamless access. You have to take a rights-based approach now, and a useful trajectory within Canada. We have what's called the Digital Charter, which talks about the rights of Canadians within the digital realm. We've got some work happening with our Federal Privacy Act, but also our Commercial Privacy Act as well. And my thinking, maybe it's not specific to GDPR, but it's basically around respecting the rights of individuals, or protecting the rights of individuals within the digital realm, and everything else flows from that. There's some really good work that's coming out of, I believe, one of the think tanks from Harvard. There was a paper just published a couple days ago that talks about it in relation to economic, social, cultural rights. And they made an interesting point in the paper that we may be focusing too much on just privacy to the exclusion of other rights as well. So I think there's again, I don't consider myself by any means qualified to speak in this space, but I see that there's a really fruitful pursuit to understand digital identity from a rights-based approach.
And I guess also people talk about contextual privacy. So it also depends on the context that for example, if a doctor asking you for medical record, then you are happy to give, but if I don't know, some kind of e-commerce site asking you of health record, maybe you might think twice, right? I mean, you want to give them all this health record data.
Yeah. Context is everything, and we issued guidance years ago about for our guideline identity assurance, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about defining your context. And the context is basically your enabling legislation, your collection authorities, and that. And the first question I ask, if a department or agency is standing up, has identity management requirements, the first question I ask is, what's your context? Define your context in relation to our guidance. What's your enabling legislation? What's your collection authorities? And in fact, I also say that identity information is a subset of personal information. That's even subject to even more stringent controls that you have in privacy. So we talk to our privacy folks quite often, and I can talk quite a bit about that area as well. It basically it's a subset of personal information subject to even more strict controls that you have for privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing is I think Hong Kong and a few other Asian countries are sort of doing a lot of this POC work on digital identity. So I guess they also have to come up with some sort of governance or trust framework. You have any advice to some of us? I mean, since I think Canada has probably been doing this for years. I mean, any suggestion advice on how we should pursue that?
For developing frameworks or legislation?
Yeah, frameworks. Let's say frameworks.
It's very multidisciplinary. I would say you have to involve like many stakeholders from many perspectives. Yeah, I mean, I can give you generic advice. I'd say the thing that's always clear. I oftentimes get people say, "Well, how do you compare Canada to country X?" I say, I can't compare. And if I do, it's a disservice because I don't understand. Every country has a very long and deep history in the development of its institutions and societies, and I just cannot comment as an outsider. So I think you have to look at it in relations to your own institutions and build it up, and the value judgments have to come within your own context. And I would say you just got to recognize that you're building or developing what I call country scale systems or country scale approaches, and you have to really draw upon your own societal context to develop that. That's about as far as I can comment.
A lot of this approach is sort of here in this part of the world is like government driven, but I guess there's also the private sector. You think that it should be collaboration or
yeah, it's basically, it's a confluence of interests, and that's what's difficult to navigate. We've had our own challenges even in Canada as well. You've got government, you have civil society, you have the commercial sector, you have advocacy groups. And my advice is that you need to be as transparent and open as possible. And a lot of times you think this is kind of the shift I've had. You think you're doing it in the best interests of your constituency, and then you realize that there's a whole other dimension that you actually haven't considered. Like in the Canadian context, like we're going through like a pretty significant reconciliation process with the Indigenous peoples here. And we're realizing that, or we have realized that maybe these institutions that have been put in place through like, past history is just not the way to go. And we actually have to recognize, well, I mean, it's not for us to recognize, it's for us to work together on this. We have to recognize that there's equally valid claims on not only the land that we're on, but also the rights that we have, and that's another process. Not to keep it open-ended, but I think it's made us much more open. And like, in Canada, for example, we have the 13 provinces and territories, but we also have like, I believe at last count about 300 treaties that we've negotiated. So, it's maybe not explicit in the trust framework, but we've made it as neutral that all of a sudden we have to recognize a band or an Indigenous community as being equal. Well, we can do that. We try to pull out like the political stuff out of the trust framework, so these concepts can be applied if a new political context. And I think we had written a chapter for our book, and that was one of the key things that we made the point that governance and political institutions, political boundaries are always in flux. And you might be coming into a situation where it's an oversimplistic demarcation of authorities or rights. But when you get into the ground, you realize, oh, it's not that way. And so the thing I've learned is I can't comment or pontificate as an outsider to any country or any political unit that's out there.
Okay, I see Peter's back. Peter, you have any questions you want to ask?
That's fine. So it might be a bit off the track, but just having an analogy, for example, for the wireless networking, we have 2G, 3G, then 4G, 5G, 6G. So the generations are kind of chronological and developing. From the security perspective, on the other hand, so we have different orthogonal solutions, tangential solutions, inline solutions. We are mixing them. We are having new solutions, and probably in case of blockchain, it is hitting in many of the cases the bullseye, and that's why we are taking these as one of the key solutions nowadays. So my question, it could be to Tim or it could be to any of one of you. So probably blockchain is kind of mature right now. What's next? So what are the applications that we are yet to cover up by the blockchain, and what would be the next generation of this sort of security technologies? Any idea?
I can chip in. I would say like a lot of the blockchain solutions are shaking out to be what are called layer 1 solutions, like the Bitcoin blockchain, Ethereum, etc. There's a lot of really interesting stuff on what's been called layer 2, like lightning payments. I've been following that quite closely, and if you actually take a look at the protocols, they're basically protocols that leverage those cryptographic primitives that we talk about that we're talking about earlier. So the thing is, I think there's a whole set of capabilities that are going to emerge. I have no idea what they will be, that will be anchored on like the Bitcoin blockchain or other blockchains. So you're seeing like Microsoft, for example, announce their Microsoft Ion decentralized identifiers that can be anchored into a public ledger, so to speak. So I think you're going to see sort of new, the what next will be not so much the blockchain, but layered solutions on top of that, and then further on top of that, applications. I think that's kind of where my bet is. Just like the same thing happened with mapping, geomatics. Once that was all standardized, and then Google really got into the game, then you got the Ubers and the Airbnbs and that, and basically developed entirely new business models and really disrupted like traditional transport. So I think you're going to see a lot of layer 2 activity.
Yeah, I think it's similar in Hong Kong. I think we are exploring how the with like say the digital identity credential, like government are thinking whether all the now, I mean, people, you need different certificate to conduct your business. They're all siloed, and then you can take time to get them, and then the government exploring whether that can be issued as some kind of credential that the corporate can actually obtain it online, and then you can go, people can verify, anyone can verify it. Or let's say even for, and also one thing, for example, interestingly, the insurance authority, I mean, there's some concern of whether the insurance agents, whether they're really insurance agent or they have the credentials, and so they're thinking of whether they can issue some kind of a professional kind of credential, like people can check whether they are indeed an agent or not. Yeah. So these are some of the things happening in Hong Kong. Yeah. Any more questions about any question or comments from all the speakers?
I had a quick question for
Yeah.
Tim. That is that the document that you have put together, the Pan Canada Trust Framework, is that doc available online?
Yes, it is. I'm putting the GitHub link. I think I saw some. I just noticed something in the chat right now. So I'm just literally doing a Control-C, Control-V right now. So and I presume you'll be able to put it in the notes post this. Yeah, so there we go. I put it in. And the other project I'm managing is the Innovation Challenge, to really more deeply understand the technologies and their application. And again, I do have that on GitHub as well.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, Karim, we should take a look. I mean, we've been studying that in Hong Kong.
It comes without, it comes without warranty because things change.
Yes, a different version of it. Yeah, yes.
Can I have one more question?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Again, about future. For example, back to 10 or 20 years, we have different mechanical devices and we have different mechanical wasps. And now we are in the probably industry 4, and we have many e-wasp, electronic wasp. And after having the blockchain, as it is generating too much data, so many data. So are you forecasting to have some sort of data wasp after 5 or 10 years? So many data, and those are archived. Probably we are not needing them. Probably we need to make them kind of wasp, any sort of thing like that. Because in case of blockchain, that is generating tremendous amount of data. Any comment on that?
I guess my comment, yeah, we're going to be generating a lot of data, but I think there are going to be new techniques to keep that anonymous, or keep it blinded for our own purposes, because the model that we have now, the information sharing model, you give stuff and you lose control, and that's basically how everybody's built their business models, the Googles, the Apples, especially all the like the Fitbits and watch stuff. They use that to fuel their business models. I think there's an opportunity, and I think this is going to require a lot of study as well. Like there's some newer cryptographic protocols or techniques like pairing-based cryptography. You can actually provide information, but it's on your own terms, and you can share stuff without it necessarily attributing to you, but also enabling some sort of correlation, not on your own terms. And I think that's a really interesting area of research as well. Like, you know, some of these primitives were developed years ago, like the Peterson commitments. You're hearing a lot of stuff about a lot of discussion, like zero knowledge proofs, but I would say, and myself included, the policymakers still don't really understand it. And I've already flagged that there's some potential, like, possibilities of vendor capture, that we go with schemes that aren't very well formulated yet. But you know, the data is going to be out there. I think the key thing that we need to understand is that we need to have it shared on our own terms, and basically keep the agency with the individual. So there's a really interesting line of research there that I think is certainly worth pursuing.
Yeah, I sort of agree with what Tim is saying. I mean, blockchain by itself, I mean, a lot of this privacy thing, I mean, it's not going to be solved by blockchain. It's going to be solved by cryptography, actually. I mean, blockchain is just some fancy database. There are a lot of, as Tim was saying, that there are a lot of the cryptography been working on this. I don't know, some of them been around for 10 years, but they never find a use case. Now I think people are beginning to see that maybe they can be applied but I think one of the thing is, again, I think I also talking to people is, with all this zero knowledge proof, all this fancy thing is, a lot of them are very new technology. I mean, they haven't been fully tested. So it's not clear that that people have found all the loopholes. I mean, a lot of time when you use the cryptography protocol, you want something to be, I don't know, robust. That's been attacked for many years. Like, people have sort of figured out what the problem is. And some of these things that people are coming out is, I mean, there are cases like SegCache, which is one they use some zero knowledge proof, and I guess there was some very subtle error, and then no one know about it. They know about it, and then if they didn't tell anyone about it, no one else will find out about it. So it's not clear. I mean, whether that might take time. I mean, before I think one has to be a little bit more careful about some of these.
Yeah. And I would add, a lot of innovation can be built on a lot of the proven algorithms, like like the ECDSA digital signature algorithm. Right. Basically, the reason it was adopted because Schnorr was patented, right. And so exactly, yeah. And Schnorr enables you to do like aggregate signatures, a lot of multi-signature stuff that you just couldn't do with DSA. I don't want to get too technical, but the thing is, oh man, there's a lot of innovation there, and it's like, you know, it's like salt and pepper ingredients. You know what they are, and yeah, there's newer stuff, but oh boy, you can do a lot of stuff. Like, you know, I'm pretty excited with Taproot's going to be activated on Bitcoin. I think block 700,000 or something like that, and it's basically they're putting in like Schnorr signatures, and what you can do with that is absolutely incredible. So let's not kind of sell short like some of the, you know, less exciting capabilities that you can do a lot of stuff with.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, so yeah, for example, I work with some of the cryptographers. You know, I guess they're looking at just like multi-signature. You thought everything already done in multi-signature, apparently.
No, it's just starting. It's starting.
Yeah. So it's exciting. I mean, I think the cryptographers are exciting. They told me that they never thought that thing can be really, I don't know, that can go live, and they say, no, I mean, we need your stuff.
Yeah. And there's some really exciting stuff too, like a proof of inclusion. There's some new cryptographic primitives that need to be tested out, but like right now in the Bitcoin blockchain, you actually have to like build your own database and of all the unspent transactions. But now there's a way to actually put put that basically into a 32-byte value to see whether it exists or not. And there's like Bonet, one of the key cryptographers, is doing some really exciting stuff. And that stuff hasn't reached the public consciousness yet. So there's a lot of really cool innovations without kind of going to the next generation Star Trek kind of stuff that hasn't been figured out yet.
Right, absolutely. So let's see. Maybe so that was 10. I think maybe I'll try to wrap it up, unless someone else have questions. So I think first of all, thanks for all the participants. I mean, Tim, for your great presentation and your insights and comments. Professor Islam, Rabani, and then also Mr. Dr. I think he left already. Probably have some other appointment. So I think it was a great. I think it was a great session. I think I learned a lot from all of you. I myself am very passionate about the digital identity, because I think a lot of what I'm doing is on digital identity, verifiable credential. So it's great to hear from Tim, and then about what is some of the things that's going on in Canada, some of the new development. For me, I think digital identity is definitely, I think, in terms for blockchain, I think application, I think digital identity is absolutely the core of everything, because the first thing you want to do any kind of transaction, right, whether it's blockchain or not blockchain, I mean, you need to know who your counterparty is, right? That's you have to know especially now with COVID-19, more and more things are pushed online. Okay, so as Tim was saying, that I also see in my experience myself, a lot of things have been really accelerated with the discussion of digital identity. Things that we thought might take a year or two, and was sort of pushed out in a few months' time. I mean, so the whole thing is really accelerating at a great pace. And I think this is something that I see that a lot of countries are working on. Hong Kong is definitely working on this. Singapore, I'm sure I would listen to Bangladesh, was another section. I think Bangladesh is definitely looking at digital identity in a very serious manner. I mean, how we can help a lot of these, whether it's for the government or for banking or for the private industry. But I think, but it's good that what Tim and in Canada, they have been doing this trust framework. I think this is absolutely important. Because if we don't have the trust framework, then the technology itself is, I mean, you can build something pretty fast. But without technology, I mean, the framework, then, I mean, how do the question become, I mean, why would the verifier trust all these, credentials? I mean, and based on what? Okay, I think that's the key. I think to make this happen, we need that framework in order for it to really build a robust system that can really that can be useful, I think. So yeah, thanks everyone for your participation. If there are no questions, maybe we will end the session here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. It was a great session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Okay.